What's up, guys? This is Phil Galfond from RunAtonce.com. Today I'm going to be two-tabling some 50-cent $1 Zoom live, commentating as I go. I will start off with this hand. I actually think I might be able to profitably call here. I don't think I'm necessarily supposed to. But I think that in a three-way pot with a cold caller who potentially might be weak, I think I can get away with it, especially given the price that I was being laid. So for this week's essential video, I'm going to bet here. Once it gets checked through, I think this guy has ace-king, an awful lot. And I think the other player, well, who knows? But could just have air pretty often. And that's one of the reasons I think I can get away with calling there with those pot odds. I've somewhat under-rep my hand by checking back the flop here, but I don't think his turn range is super, super weak for betting. I still think I have to call at least one. And the board does brick off, and he does not give up. I actually think I'm going to lose here quite a bit, but I think I'm just a little too high up in my range to fold, and there's always the chance that he could be making some kind of weird play with a worse jack or with a 9 or something. But yeah, I think that, if I know a player is reasonable, I think it's pretty somewhat standard fold, I would say, on that river. And almost, I didn't feel great about it on the turn. Anyways, this is going to be a quick one, just a quick little session. I am trying this month to make 2 smaller videos, 1 PLO and 1 no limit, for and both half length, for the purpose of making sure everybody gets a little something they can watch. Actually, this is the second time that I've recorded this or started this recording, so I may have already said all that. I don't know. I think on the left table there with my set of 9s, the standard play is just to go ahead and bet. I don't mind building a check call range there, or even check raise range that contains 9s. I think 9s become a very good check call hand just because of how I block, the most likely hand he can call with on multiple streets. And I could just, I don't fear any free cards, so why not just let him start bluffing? I think that would have been fine. But that said, I decided to bet, which I think is somewhat standard. So obviously I'm not going to have anything in the way of reads. I do have, or I tried to have my HUD running. It doesn't seem to be working yet, but it doesn't really matter, just because the player pool's a little too big for me to get any kind of meaningful data, during the span of this video. So we'll have to just base my plays on kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, but balance. And I'm not really a game theory player, but something like that, the way that I think you should be playing in general, and not so much on player specifics. Obviously, adjusting to players is one of the most important skills. So I'm actually going to raise and go with this. No, I'm not. I'm actually just going to call. I was thinking that I could get him to call and fold a lot of flops, but the stack to pot ratio is just a little too weird, and so I think I'm better off just calling there and seeing a flop, and I am just going to check fold this one. Interesting decision on the left table. I call a regular size c-bet and a small turn bet. I'm faced with a small turn bet. I think I'm just going to take the standard line and call again rather than turn my hand into a bluff. I'm getting such a good price. Why not just take it rather than, offer him the potential to re-raise and blow me off my equity, or, put in money when I don't have to against a range that's doing pretty well against me. We could talk about the idea of overbetting, but I think in the span of this video, especially while the action is fast and furious, it's probably not the best time for it. And yeah, he was making I don't know what you want to call it, I guess kind of a block bet to get value. It's a value bet. So king queen, I don't think I can call against an under the gun raise. I'm going to use it as blockers to 3-bet bluff. And I think this play is fine. I don't think it's mandatory. I think this is the kind of play that's going to be very read dependent. Yeah, it's going to be very, very player dependent. So I get cold called, the initial razor folds, so my plan half worked. There's not really a better hand that's folding on this flop or a worse hand that's calling. However, I'm a little nervous about, no, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to check and figure it out. I think that putting in a bet in a pot this big on the flop is unnecessary, and I can have a range that check calls. And I'm actually going to go ahead again and check the turn and probably call one bet if he decides to bet here. I still don't know if I can value bet this hand. A lot of his cold calling range might be pocket tens or jacks, so I am going to try to exploit that and kind of blocking value bet. I'm going to make it a size that I think that hand can call pretty often, and that way, if he does have an ace also, I think it serves as, a blocking bet, because if I check, he might bet like 14 with an ace. But cold calling ranges generally do consist of, if it's not a total, well, fish, then it's gonna contain a lot of hands like jacks, tens, nines. So here I raise. I flop pretty well. I think I can go either way here between checking to check call and just betting. I think check calling against a tough opponent is pretty good. You actually get them to stab with their fives and then fold on a future street. You could even check raise that board and it'll work out fairly well. That might have even been a better play. Although you do run the risk of, I think I can get away with this. This is very close and pretty loose. Let's see. So I run the risk of getting a lot of money in against the nut flush draw with the ace, which I'm drawing dead against, but that's a risk you take. Here I'm going to go for the check raise. I just expected him to fold very often to a bet, so I felt that maybe I could make him stab. I think he just has a lot of ace high here. I am going to go ahead with a bet to see if I can either get him to call with ace high or potentially induce some kind of weird spazzy raise. This might have been misplayed by me. So first we'll talk about this. I'm gonna slow the action, or sit out, completely stop the action, so we can talk about it. Yeah, I think that I think actually check raising here is going to show a pretty good profit because of how often people stab incorrectly, and betting really, is not that bad. It's certainly nothing wrong with it. It's the standard play, but I think that you can get people to bet fold and collect that extra bet fairly often if you check raise, and I think check calling works out fairly well from a balance perspective for your overall range for a lot of reasons, but for board coverage on those turns that you hit, turns and rivers you hit. And so he did have jacks over here. And finally on this left table, he did just have air, so I think checking was fine, and check raising in case he somehow has, queens that he checked back. I guess check calling the turn might even be better and hoping he bluffs, but it'd be a disaster if he has a hand like ace 10 or pocket jacks and we check called the turn. So I think betting the turn is okay. I think I prefer check raising with a hand this monstrous and this unafraid of allowing him to have a free card. So yeah, King Queen is a pretty decent 3-bet bluff hand against an early position open because you can't call with it. It blocks kings, it blocks queens, it blocks ace king, it blocks ace queen. And in situations like that where you do run into tens or jacks, you still have okay equity. I get 3-bet very small, very easy call over here. On the left table, I think that I'm going to start with the bet, mostly as a protection bet. I don't think I can get 3 streets of value with this hand. So that would, against a tough player, make me more inclined to check back. On the right table, I'm going to call with my double gutter and backdoor flush draw. And I am going to call here, but I felt exploitatively I can get 1 or 2 streets of value with this 7, or bet and then check back and pick off a river bluff. So on the right table, he's repping, ace X, ace ace, jack jack, or king king, queen queen. I think king is very likely, which is unfortunate because it blocks a lot of my outs. But given this price, I am going to call again and potentially rep diamonds. He check raises and checks this 8 turn. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I think I have a very easy check back. Betting would be a pure protection play, which I don't think is terrible, but I'd rather just check back because so much of his check calling range is going to be a 10. Interesting. And I'm just going to go for it. Everything missed, but I just think it's so likely he has kings. With the ace pairing, kings are like air, maybe even. But with the ace pairing, so a strong player, let's just fold that. A strong player here would recognize this ace as a very good card for pocket kings because it reduces my combinations of ace-ace. He didn't seem to be a strong player given his small raise sizing. I'm going to go ahead and just bet this flop for value and protection. I think he has a lot of pocket pairs in his range that can call me. And I think I can bet once again. I mean, the 9 does bring in obviously the flush draw. He also, 6s, 5s are still good for me, but 9s are one of the hands he could have had. I'm still going to bet for value though. It is tough because on the river I don't know if I want to bet for value, but I want to get the value now before a queen or a jack or king or an ace hits against his pocket 6s. And he makes a small raise. Let's see if we can get a country read. Russia. I'm not really sure what to make of this. I mean, it looks as though he's representing a flush, quite obviously. I have pretty good pot odds. And actually against a flush, I have 4 outs, which is not, a tremendous amount, but it's reasonable, especially because 2 of them, I'm going to get the rest of his $27. That plus the fact that he could be bluffing and potentially give up on the river, I think I can peel. And this should actually make him shut down potentially with some of his weaker flushes. I mean, I guess, though, his flushes are all going to be stronger, given that I have the 10 stronger than mine, or if he gives up, I have the best hand anyways. I think now I'm just going to fold. I don't see people, nothing really missed, and I don't see people turning like pocket 6s into a bluff here. So even though my hand looks pretty strong, or got stronger, I'm going to lay this down. And, that was iffy all around. But I think I'm happy with the way I played it. And here on the left table, so a stronger player would know that this ace is a good card for pocket kings. But a weaker player, especially, if he's a very weak player, might think like he was already worried about being beat by aces, and now he's like, oh man, now I might be beat by trip aces. So I think when he checks that card and I jam pretty quickly, he is going to give me a lot of credit. This turn I actually don't see a ton of fold equity because he often does have an ace to check call. But I think betting twice is okay with my equity and the potential that he folds a hand like, I don't know, even 9-8 rather than let him bluff me on the river, or a 7. And I'm actually not going to bet this river. I think the 6 is not a good card for me. He could have like 6-5 as well as ace X is often not folding. And before I start up this table, so yeah, I think the fact that he 3-bet smaller and just played his hand in a way that struck me as recreational player made me think that I had a lot of fold equity on that river, whereas against a stronger player, I would not expect a ton of fold equity. Some fold equity, certainly, but not a ton, given that every draw missed. So this player raises and checks to us. I think we could check behind, or we could bet. I'm going to assume that I'm going to bet for mostly protection, a tiny bit of value. Left table, I make a steal that you don't have to make, but I'm going to assume people are overfolding in these games. I would imagine if you're playing these games, hopefully you'd be running a HUD that works, and you have a sample on some of the players, but I would imagine that people are way overfolding the blinds, and I think that's actually a way you can make significant money. Yeah, I think it's a way to make a ton of money. You're also going to find players, I mean, I don't know how, well, let's see how large the player pool is. 280 players right now. So the player pool is large, but you can get in a lot of hands, and I think that, if you get enough hands on people, you're going to find people with significant stat leaks, whether it be overfolding the blinds, overfolding plus under 3-betting, which makes you want to open more, whether it be folding to 3-bets when they open in late position at a very high frequency. There are a lot of things that could work well in your favor. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this hand to see if that's true. I would imagine it's true of a lot of players. Yeah, that sizing is okay, I guess. And I guess it'd be inconsistent for me not to 3-bet this hand as well. But you definitely don't have to 3-bet all your King 4 suiteds. I just think that people are going to overfold, and I actually just wanted to find that out during the course of this video. So here we have an interesting situation where we've turned a fairly strong draw. It appears that he has a pair or ace high, and the stack to pot ratio is awkward. I think I'm going to go ahead and bet on the smaller side and jam river. I think having a range that just overbets right now is kind of interesting, but not probably the way I want to play a lot of my range. Back in the day, a lot of people would just overbet, have an overbet jam range for 2x pot on those boards, which I think is okay. But the problem is, I want to play this. This is basically a block and protection bet on the left table. I'm going to call on the right table and try to show this down. And I do want to sit out and look at that hand a little bit more in depth. I mean, it looks to me like he does have like pocket sixes, but I am just going to call just in case he has a busted flush draw with the price I'm being laid. Yeah. And on the left table, so we could talk about both actually. So now we'll talk about the right table first. Both my King X suited 3-bets, which you definitely don't need to be doing, but if you can find a player whose fold to 3-bet is especially high, or who's just especially weak post-flop, I think you can get away with a lot of exploitative 3-bets in these games. Really just pay attention to your pre-flop stats and your flop stats. Those are all ones that converge fairly quickly, so you don't need a massive sample. But if you have somebody c-betting 90% and folding to 70% of check raises, you need to check raise every hand, basically, all your bluffs, at least on most boards. And you can do a little more work and identify the boards on which it happens more often. But these are all things that you don't want to spend a ton of time looking for at high stakes, just because you're not going to find these massive leaks. But in these games, you can really find them. And not that you have the time to game plan against all of your opponents, but yeah, there's still a lot of value in just at least having the right stats on your HUD so that you could maximally exploit the players. So the 3-bet, if you have somebody who's folding to a lot of 3-bets and or opening a lot of buttons, oftentimes you can get away with this. I don't think it's standard by any means. I think folding is maybe a little more standard. Bet the flop, kind of on the smaller side. I think it's all that's really necessary to make him fold non-ace high hands. But he does call. I do think a decent chunk of his range is going to be ace high. Actually, a lot of his range is probably going to be ace high, with or without a gutter. Some pairs, but probably not 10s plus. Probably not, at least not jacks or queens plus. And the 9's a pretty good card for me, and that obviously it brings me a big draw. And I think overbet jamming here will make him fold probably, I don't know, anything worse than 6s. 6x, I mean. Maybe hands as strong as 8s. And you can build a range where you do it with overpairs, which actually this is kind of a decent spot to do it with strong draws and overpairs maybe, because betting an overpair for this amount and having him call with a hand like 6-7 or 5-4 or a hand like mine gets awkward, and you're giving him a price to draw and use his positional advantage on rivers. However, the reason that I wanted to bet this size is I felt this would be more than enough to make him fold his ace high hands, unless he has a flush draw. So I thought he would fold out ace highs. He would also fold out, most hands that contain a queen or a jack, as well as a king, because a lot of those are going to be, like if he called the flop, he didn't call the flop with queen 9. So a lot of his range to call the flop is going to be pocket pairs, ace high, with or without a gutter, maybe open-enders, or like ace-6 or 7-6, yeah. A lot of his range is going to be ace-high. A lot of it's also going to be 7-6, 5-7, 9-8, 9-7. And a lot of those are calling the turn as well. But basically, I thought on the turn I could make him fold all of his ace-highs, and then on the river, in addition to my actual outs, which are 3s and all the spades and kings, I think that I can profitably shove as a bluff on aces, queens, jacks, perhaps 10s. Maybe less so on 10s, but really any and all of them I think make a lot of sense. And so I think I have a ton of real outs and a ton of bluff outs in a spot like this. And I actually do think on, let's say, a 6 or a deuce or an 8, I would just go ahead and shut down. So I'm bluffing this turn to fold out his ace highs and then to bluff the high card rivers, as well as, obviously jam the ones that I hit. And then king 3, I made a pretty exploitative play. So after another 3-bet that's unnecessary, but fine against the right opponent, I go ahead and bet on the smaller side on the flop. Again, I think he'll call with a lot of ace highs. He'll call with a lot of flush draws. Betting on a larger side is fine too. I mean, it's really turning my hand into a bluff, which there's nothing wrong with that actually, treating this hand as a bluff. But I figured if I get him to call with ace high and then we check it down, it's not that bad. But then I thought, obviously I have to do this thinking pretty quickly in Zoom while I'm talking. But here on the turn, I was thinking that if he has, queen jack of hearts, or I don't know, 4-5 of clubs, or ace-5 of diamonds, I think that I would rather just bet this sizing and get him to fold a lot of those hands. I guess queen jack of hearts probably peels again, so maybe I need to go a little bit bigger if I want to make his hearts fold. But for the most part, it's just to protect my hand from ace high. I think that checking and letting him bluff with his floats and realize his equity with his other hands when my hand is this vulnerable is probably a bad idea. I think I can check, some strong draws to check jam. I can check some stronger hands like pocket kings or pocket aces, which I don't see. I mean, there's obviously value in betting, but those are hands I'd want to induce floats with that I'm not as worried about giving free cards. But king 3 is just so weak that that I think I'd rather. I mean, you can call it a protection bet, but it's really just a bluff, I would say. Potentially, he can call again with ace high, and then we show it down. But I was not going to bluff any rivers with this hand, actually. But you don't have to 3-bet all of your king X suited. I do think that it'll be profitable against, probably more than half of the opponents in these games if you're going to play reasonably well post flop. 8-7 offsuit is not an open from the cutoff, but if the game is especially tight and my HUD were working, then I would open it. Uh, 8-7 suited is it's a good 3-betting hand. And this hand on the left table, I actually recognize this player as a pretty good regular. So I think actually I can't profitably call against his under the gun open with this suited connector. If it was another player in the hijack, I would call. And this hand, it's very close. I think you can go ahead and 3-bet, but it's really close. And now that I've timed down, I think it kind of hurts my fold equity and my ability to represent a strong hand. But I think that you can't go too wrong 3-betting a suited connector every now and then. We open on the left table and get called by a shorter stack, who we're going to assume is a little bit weaker. I think I should just go ahead and bet this flop for value. I don't expect either of them to have ace-king. Some king-jack, sure. But that's not a major concern. But I was thinking about checking and seeing if I can get him to bet, but actually check jamming is just going to make him fold his 10-9s and his jack-x, whereas if I just bet, he'll call and potentially call down on certain rivers. Or certain board runouts. This player limps under the gun with a short stack. I'm just going to go ahead and raise. Let's go 550 because this actually could get a little awkward to play on some flops. And the old limp re-raise, you got me. Left table, I guess I'm going to go for 3 streets of value. It's a little bit thin. Well, not thin, but I don't expect him to call down 3 streets with much worse. So the limper raise with 4-3 suited. I believed that he had a strong hand. I just didn't care because I had 10s. So in a sense, he tricked me. I don't think that you should open this hand. I think it's okay. I'm actually going to go ahead and limp, which I think is a reasonable strategy. I think actually limping is not going to be necessary in these games because you're going to have so many people who overfold that you're going to almost always be better off with the raising and folding range. So yeah, I think that I didn't need to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of exploitatively bet half pot to protect my hand. Not really expecting many worse hands to call, and I'm not expecting any better hands to fold. So I think sizing it larger in a vacuum doesn't do much for me. I'm going to go ahead and call with pocket 4s. I'm going to call with king jack. I think 3-betting is okay. But I imagine that people aren't going to be making as light call downs. So hands like this are great to 3-bet if people call 3-bets on the lighter side and then call you down in such a way that you can value bet confidently across 3 streets with top pair good kicker, like this so often flops. But I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think people might be too nitty and would not make hero calls, and often, in addition to that, might just fold pre-flop so that their what am I trying to say? Yeah, their continuing range pre-flop contains far too many, better hands like king queen, ace jack, etc. So I might end up value cutting myself on a lot of board runouts. This guy's 3-bet me on the smaller side. We're a little bit deep, so I'm going to call. Let's do a country check. He's from Russia. I don't actually have a very strong read on Russian players, so it doesn't help me too much. Flopping a flush does. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and raise right now. I think waiting for a brick turn is okay. Waiting for a brick turn is okay, but if he has king-king with diamonds, or with a diamond, or ace-king with a diamond, I'd just rather get it in now, or pocket aces. I'd rather get it in, or get money in before the next diamond rolls off and kills my action from pocket aces. And also, I think people, if he has ace-king with a diamond, and I called and then raised this turn, he'd be less likely to get it in than I think he would be with, than he would be on the flop, rather. I can bet on the larger side. I don't think he's folding very often. That was a little too large given stacks, actually. But I just think he has a pretty strong range. I do need some protection from a chunk of his range. I mean, not this much. I think I could go ahead with a bet in the mid-high 40s and accomplish kind of the same thing. But I really wanted to get him to... I wanted to guarantee that he jams a hand like ace-king with the king of diamonds or ace-jack, rather than call and then potentially lose my action on certain turns. So I'm sorry to hit and run the player pool here at 50-cent dollar zoom, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, I look forward to your questions and comments, the usual. And I will see you guys with another video sometime soon, and in the forums, of course. This is Phil Galfond from runotonce.com. Take care, guys.